Welcome to We Think, We Talk, sponsored by Select Care Pharmacy, a pharmacy that is non-retail but that services the smallest of group homes to the largest of skilled nursing facilities, with prompt attention and care and world-class customer service. All right, welcome back to another episode of We Think, We Talk, sponsored by Select Care Pharmacy. I'm your host, Andy Garrison. Have a great friend of the show today, and it's kind of an exciting day. We're on camera today.
Yes.
And which is scary for some people. Some people are going to be looking and going, that's what he looks like? That's not good. I've heard Trey before. I've seen Andy, but whoa, that's different. But we just thought that, with the progression of the show, and we have great listeners, we've had great guests.
You've had great reviews and comments.
Absolutely. And which, I'm so honored. I am. I can't really say that enough to people like yourself that have supported it from day one, that have been guests coming on. And it takes your time and so many other people that have really supported what we're doing. And I appreciate it. But, when people come up to you unsolicited and be like, hey, I love this particular episode. I got something out of it.
That's cool. That's really cool.
It just means something. You walk away with your head held a little higher and you go. But, of course, my guest today is Trey Whitehurst. Trey is the specialist in anything UV lighting, but I call him the specialist in anything that's remotely cool, gadget-wise or technology or anything, because you think through these things. And we just have conversations about interesting things. And so I called you up because I wanted to have a conversation about Neuralink, which is just something that's hard to talk about because it seems no one's an expert on it.
No.
But the more you start reading and digging, the crazier this thing gets, which I knew this conversation wasn't going to be just about Neuralink by itself. Obviously, it's going to open up
Right.
a million different things. But for those that don't know, let me just give a little of what I know. This all started off just with a basic interview on another podcast that Elon Musk, which is the money behind Neuralink,
Right.
sort of has been working on. It looks since about 2018 kind of was the concept. And what it reminded me of first, coming from a medical world, was something that we had used, say, for Parkinson's, that we could go in to the brain, attach some wires, have small pulses of electricity. I guess that's the elementary way to put it. And it causes a result opposite of what's currently happening in the brain, so it can control things. Except he has taken this concept to almost infinite possibilities. Now, let me give you some things that I read that this can do. And it's the same concept that I just said. It's about going in, removing a piece of skull, taking a device, putting it in that's programmed with a computer, okay? And these little electrodes will touch different parts of the brain that control different things of our body. It can, of course, take care of Parkinson's like we talked about. It can possibly change and cure cancer, obesity, stutter problems, recreate disabilities. Paraplegics have the possibility to be able to walk again. Everything that was once permanent is now up in question is it permanent now, since we have the ability to change it. And even something cooler that I want to get into is this, because we were joking off camera. When I held up my phone and sitting there with a family dinner, can I be excused now? Not even physically communicating. This can literally be programmed, and if you have a Neuralink, and I have one, we can physically tap into each other and communicate without even speaking. So this is some Buck Rogers stuff.
Yeah, I think there's he's talking, long-term, big picture potential stuff. I did some research on it, and they've actually been working with this technology for about 25 years.
Yeah.
What he brought to the table was making it very small, and compact.
Right.
And where it's still invasive, where it goes into your skull.
Yeah, it goes into the skull.
They've had them where they just attach them to your head, but they
Right.
can't get the quite readings. But I saw some interesting stuff where they had people that were able to type messages on the computer with their brain without touching. In other words, they were
Right.
paralyzed, but they could do emails and play games,
Right.
communicating to the computer. And that's been done, I think, 2008.
Right.
So it's been around
Right.
as far as the technology. He was talking about, taking people's memories and plugging them in here and there.
And storing them.
Yeah, and I think there's some real controversy on that part.
Right.
Because there's a big controversy about where memories are to start with.
Mm-hmm. Or what is a memory?
What is a consciousness we can't even grab hold of,
No.
and you'll have all these people that believe consciousness is locally created in your brain.
Okay.
But they have no evidence to prove it. They cannot prove it.
Right.
But there's a ton of evidence that suggests that your consciousness is what they call non-local. It's not, and this goes back to more of a spiritual side.
Yeah.
Are we a body? Is your body just a body, and then you have a spirit outside of that body? And it's interesting as I've read a lot of stuff on this, and in the Western world, the materialists that say everything is centered in the body, and the body is, and when the body's over, the body's over.
Right.
But the problem is there's all these problems they run into in science where you see people with near-death experiences. You see some stuff with quantum.
But I'm an NDE junkie.
Yeah,
I can't get enough of that reading material. It's like I'm so interested in it because of these questions.
So then, but if consciousness is inside of your head only, and then you are clinically dead, how is it that you know what's going on inside your room or even outside of your room? I read one that was fascinating where a lady was describing a shoe.
Yeah.
Have you read that one? Out on a hospital, out on a part of outside the window of the hospital.
I've read stuff very similar where it was so specific.
Very specific.
Like where you could not. There's actually, not to throw you off on this, keep going, but there's actually a organization that a physician 35 years ago started, and you can go to this website, and I have to post that up because I didn't pre-think it, but he does NDE studies, nonprofit, and the questionnaire that you have to take is so good now that it can take away the fakes, it can take away the people trying for the attention, and it's not just based in the United States. This is global. So the way it's positioned, and they've come to find out that crosses religious barriers, communication, language barriers, beliefs, ethnic, everything crosses all the barriers, and the information comes back to be that are real, so similar.
Very similar.
And then you have to ask yourself, what is consciousness? Is it the spiritual thing? Is it a little synapse of energy that is constant? Which is wild to think about. That's deep. Because it's putting into question a lot of people going, oh, don't say that because you could be getting into an area that you don't want to get into, and which I'm not, because, I never get controversial or even attack a belief of anyone.
Right.
It's just, I want to know, because you and I both, we talk about this all the time, we are curious people.
We're curious people.
And I think the biggest fear I have of anything is not knowing. I like to be the guy in the room that at least knows something about something.
Right.
I don't need to know everything. I don't need to know how the air condition works. I just need to have a general idea of how it works. And it satisfies me.
Right.
But I think with the Neuralink, since it's in such a field of everything that I've ever questioned,
Right.
how it works, and I know nothing now because he's questioning everything. Like you even talked about mortality. What I've always known is the day you are clinically dead. And with me being a nurse, unfortunately, my career has been, I have seen a lot of death.
Right.
I've literally held a lot of hands at that last breath. So I have a personal belief there because I've literally seen people leave their body.
Right.
And I don't mean
Right.
leave their body, but I mean I've seen the body all of a sudden not needed.
Right.
It become just nothing. And it instantly, so this is scientific fact, the moment that it's no longer needed, so you can call it the soul leaves the body, you can call it when the brain no longer is working, ever how you want to phrase that, the body instantly starts to deteriorate. Instantly.
Because it's not being held together by something.
By something. And the question is, what is that something? And did Elon and Neuralink, are they able to tap into something to prolong it? Because if you start correcting problems that nature throws at you, like for example, you asked about my leg walking in.
Right.
Well, it's healing itself. It's doing good. Work behind it, but I anticipate it to do well. Do I expect future problems from it? Probably, because, when you have a problem with something, you got to anticipate it may be another problem. Or if someone has a heart attack, for example, somewhere in the back of their mind is the possibility of another.
Right.
Like, that's nature and time, and things are going to happen. We have been taught since we're born that our bodies age, and that accidents and age and disease and other things affect us, which will affect our daily quality of life through time. If we're very, very lucky, we go to sleep one day and we're gone. And we've lived a healthy, happy life. But changing or having the ability, that's starting to be proven. Like you said, 25 years. They've been messing with this. Mm-hmm. And most technology we don't know about until because the military or somebody's had it for that long.
Right.
So we don't see things until it really starts. They want us to see it.
Right.
What does that mean? Like, we've always talked about, I don't want to live forever. But the reason we've said that was because quality of life.
Right. You deteriorate. But if you could make your body last longer.
What if now, you and I are blessed people. We've talked about this. I think we've had a good life. We've had fun and interesting things, funny things. But what if I can tell, what if, not waff, that's not a word. What if a procedure could be done and in a couple of weeks you felt 25 again?
Well, they've done the human growth hormone injections for people.
Yeah.
And people got into that kick. And of course, some of these things, you never know the long-term effects. They start putting stuff in your body and you might not know for 20 years some of the effects on that sort of stuff,
That's right.
And asbestos was one of those things that they had was just normal. And then they realized, oh, wow, 25 years later, cigarettes they were handing out in the Army in the 40s, and so a lot of things that we jump onto, we don't know the long-term effects.
We don't.
But I think the Neuralink has some promising future in the mechanical stuff of the body.
Right.
And to me, what I've read and what I've looked at and tried to look open-mindedly and study,
that's what I was doing.
is that the body is just a placement for something else.
Right.
And you see it with near-death experiences. And then as I start reading stuff about like quantum physics, and then suddenly, Newtonian physics is blown apart.
Right.
The theory of relativity doesn't work.
No.
And it's like, well, wait a minute. And then you get into and I don't know if you've ever heard of the split test, the light test with a split thing.
Yeah, you actually have told me about this before.
So they have two slits
Yes.
in a wall, and they have a screen on the back, and they shine a light through it. And what happens is it goes through, it acts like waves,
Right.
and the waves will cancel each other out, and you'll have stripes down here, light,
Right.
dark stripe. Normal physics explains it all perfectly.
Right.
So then they said, well, let's take the light, break the wave apart, and make it particles.
Right.
So we'll shoot particles at it. Well, think of a shotgun.
Right.
If you shot a shotgun through those two slits, what would you have? Well, you'd have two lines.
That's right.
But they didn't. It acted like a wave, even though it was a particle.
Oh.
And they thought, well, that's weird. Mm-hmm. Well, then they said, well, let's measure this and see what happens to why they're going through the way they're. As soon as they put it, now they changed nothing in the experiment.
Right.
They just add a measuring device to see how many were going through.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as they add the measuring device, it started acting like particles. And this experiment's been done thousands and thousands of times. It's not like someone says, oh, that you're doing something.
Yeah.
So what it's saying is that because you pay attention to something,
Right.
you change something from a wave to a matter. Now,
That's deep.
what's the implication of that? Okay.
Right.
Is it things appear as one thing.
Right.
When you pay attention to them, they're different. You know, I had the story about and this is what Einstein, because they've known this for a long time.
Right,
You know,
yeah.
Einstein said, that the idea of if a tree falls in the wood,
Right.
does it make a noise?
Yeah.
And he's like, if you didn't pay attention to it, it didn't exist.
That's true.
And so you start getting into the quantum physics of this stuff, and then all the rules change. And this is where you start getting this idea of somebody having a consciousness outside of themselves.
Right. Right. Something I was thinking about, and I actually mentioned earlier today, and this is what this is sort of taking me on this journey, that our reality is based upon what we see. And I thought, and I think I read this in a book not too long ago, and it had nothing to do with quantum physics or anything. This was just somebody writing a pretty cool book.
Right.
But when you're like 7 months old, your reality, your physical reach in the world is really through the crib of what you can see. Your brain is not really able to comprehend how big it is outside the walls of what you can see. And this author that I was reading said, you win when you actually realize, even though you can only see the wall outside your crib, you realize there's much more past that wall. And you accept that. And you're willing to accept that as reality, even though you don't know necessarily what all it holds.
Right.
You limit yourself when you just accept that wall's the end of your reality. And I know that sounds deep, but this is making me realize that, yeah, I see my reality, but I'm also very aware that further than I can see is a lot more.
Well, see, that's the thing, is we're taught from a very young age as human beings that we get all of our information from our five senses.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And everything else is rejected out. Now, you look at, if you read a lot of stories about some of these young kids saying and seeing things,
Yeah.
okay?
And they're more open.
And because they're not been programmed that only you only get what you see. And you think about it, and even in what we see, the visual spectrum is so small.
Yeah.
There's infrared, there's ultraviolet, there's X-ray, there's gamma ray, there's radio waves, there's all these different frequencies. Mm-hmm. But we're only tuned into what we can see. Mm-hmm. You know?
That's true.
And so you think, like,
perception is our reality.
Because we've condensed ourselves down, you know, and you'll have, if you read some of the stories with the kids saying, I saw, you know, they have these invisible friends, or they see this, and they talk about things. Some of them are talking about people that maybe were in that house 50 years ago.
Right.
How do they, they're not being limited, because what do we do as parents? Oh, you're just dreaming, or
right.
And so we program ourselves not to open up to what's out there.
Right.
And then you start thinking, this can go down some rabbit holes.
Right. And we start throwing up barriers.
I read an article, and there was a book, I don't remember the name of it, but it was talking about these young kids that would start telling stories about things that happened to them. And this one little girl in Australia is telling this story about this house burning. Okay, and that she was in this, and her parents are like, what in the world is this? She's like 1 or 2, just learning how to talk, talking about her brothers and her sisters and this house burning, and the parents got very concerned and took her to the psychologist, and she's really, they researched this and tried to figure out what was going on. They find out she was talking about a location in South Jersey and a fire that happened 100 years ago.
I read this.
You remember this?
Yes, I do.
No way.
Chills. I got chills. Had the names of the mama and dad. And you could not, the research material, they even tried to go and see, is this published anywhere.
Yeah.
And it wasn't. And they had to like do this crazy amount of research to even get that information that a 5-year-old or whatever age this person was had no ability. And the parents had no clue. Well, how do you explain that?
So that begs a question, and this is where it gets people go, you're crazy. There are many religions that talk about multiple lives.
Right.
Well, if your body is just a housing unit and your soul is one that carries on, is it not possible you could be in this body and then your soul could go into another body?
Right.
I mean,
I've heard this, and I read about, since I read the NDEs a lot, I read about it, it's called a reset. And here's an explanation. It's and don't take this as my belief, or I'm certainly not canceling anybody else's belief. This was just an understanding of how it's explained to me, which kind of helped me make sense to it in my elementary mind. Since nothing is calculated perfectly, like really even the temperature of water, if it changes slightly, things change.
right.
All right. So understand that if you apply that to a life, and somehow in the grand design, your life was cut short, not the way it was intended to, so it wasn't fulfilled, right? They consider that, certain people that do research in this field consider that as a reset because it ended abruptly or ended not the way that it was fulfilled fully.
Right.
So whatever the next step for you is in our spiritual journey or our life journey or ever how you want to say it, since it wasn't fulfilled by destiny, it resets and there's a redo. And one of the articles specifically you're talking about, and there's the guy that studies this that did multiple of these cases that proved like one had to go to another country,
Right.
and it was crazy.
Right.
As those children age, those memories, specific details start to fade, and then they start to come into their own current life and live that life. So by the time of 13 to 18, they've vague memories,
that's
if
been-
any, has been
closed
sort of
out.
washed, and their current life is taken over as full. They're in full control of that, so they're not missing that person or missing these people that were familiar.
Or you think about how many memories do you have when you're under 5?
Yeah.
Very, just maybe a picture here or a
Right.
picture there. Everything's kind of like blocked out.
Right. Where do you stand in your own mind that, because you're open guy. I mean, you like we said at the beginning, you're curious. You're like I am.
Right.
You're willing to step a little bit further into an uncomfortable zone than most people of
Yeah.
trying to figure things out. No one said that was offered to you. Let's say Neuralink called you, said, Trey, we want to test you because the next step of this, which they plan on doing this year, is they had to have human participants. They have done all the testing they can do on everything other than a living human specimen,
Right.
saying let's go. And on a side note, the first question you think is, who in the world is going to sign up for this? Well, there's so many people with terminal illnesses that list is not hard to fill.
That's where it's going to go.
It's not hard to fill, because I know if I had a terminal illness and you know me, I have college age children, you have children, and we want to see more.
Right.
You
Right.
know,
Right.
I'm signing up just because it's not the fear of me leaving. It's the fear that I don't want to leave them.
Well, I think right now, he's just trying to get people to. I think his whole point of bringing this out is not to say we got this revolutionary thing that's going to change everything. He's basically sending out a signal saying, people, come join me. We've got to figure this out. We're in such early stages.
Yes.
And I read that the FDA didn't allow them to do the human testing. They rejected them.
Right.
But they had some doctors out there that made this big case. Well, somebody put too much glue on the insertion on the monkey, and then it makes me think, okay, is this political? How everything
Of
gets
course.
wrapped around that. But I think they've already done stuff with people that are paralyzed,
Right.
and stuff like that. So I think, in my mind, that's where they're going to go, is to say, okay, can we help people that can't move limbs, or are, can't speak or can't hear, and try to fix. I kind of see it, at least in the early 5 or 10 years from now,
Right.
being able to help people that have, paralysis problems,
Right.
or maybe even just possible with dementia. I don't know. I don't know enough about that.
Well, I saw the dementia, how the technology, they know how in programming that they could reverse. It's just applying it. And another thing that I thought about that was huge that they can do, it's just getting the approval and being able to do it without any
Right.
without every lawsuit in the whole world coming after you.
Right.
Is chronic pain. That's a huge worldwide issue. And with the click of a button, that goes away. But the thing that I thought about deeper than this, because it's so cool, because it's almost unlimited. It's like that movie that came out, where the guy took the pill, Limitless.
Yeah.
Just like all of a sudden it knows everything, can fix everything. But it opens up the door. Imagine this. So let's say we as a society, which obviously now we're accepting a lot of new information. We're accepting a lot of new things as a society. Not that we agree with or disagree. We're just having to accept it.
Yes, we're being told this is what you have to.
This is what you have to accept now. So let's say this is the case. And this, obviously technology is there. It's going to progress. It's going to proceed. It's going to become a thing. But think about everything else that opens up. So everything that we've ever known for like planning for retirement, planning our lives, what does a standard mortgage look like? What does an insurance plan look like and what it covers? Obviously in the pharmacy world, they predetermine that, how long you're going to be pharmacy benefits, what medicines you'll be on. All that changes.
So you're going to add 50 years to your life. What does that do to the actuaries of
Right.
Social Security?
Right.
Medicare?
If you and I right now were to call a friend of the show, Dan Watson, okay?
Yeah.
Deals with every type of insurance. Well, if I call him now, he's going to ask the standard questions, and all of them are going to be horrible. How old are you? How much do you weigh?
That's right.
All
That's
this
right.
wonderful
That's
stuff.
right.
So he's going to be like, your policy is $70 million. No, but it's going to come out with a number because that number has a chart, and that chart is based on averages of age and death and everything. Well, this one device changes all that. All that has to change. You'll be people, like you'll literally, in my opinion, this is just my opinion, so there's no scientific fact to this, but we already know that people are now waiting longer to get married, okay, because I can remember 18 being not a problem.
Right.
Now people are going to wait, say, to the 35. But you know what? They can start having children at 40, and it's still not even, that's still young if you add another 50 years. I mean, and then what does that do for the benefit? Because I've always made the statement, which I still believe is true, if physically I could have waited till 40 to have children, the life I could have provided them and the knowledge I could give them, their quality would have been so much better. Because they had to live through my mistakes.
Yeah, they don't come with handbooks.
They don't come with handbooks. Dr. Spock worked really hard, but he still had so much more he had to give. I mean, but being that this one guy, and I like Elon Musk. Two things I like about him. I just put that out there publicly. One, I like, and there's people that love him and hate him.
Right.
Which is fine.
Right.
But one thing that I like that he does is, he put stuff out there and didn't put a patent on it either, because we've kind of talked about Bell Laboratories before. Things like that.
Right.
I think he has a realization that his world will end, and he knows it. But he wants to put what him and his money and his research and everything, what they have found, what they have discovered, new technology, but they don't want to put a cap. So you and I can go into this, dive into the information, and if we can make it a little better, we don't have to work around patents to do it.
Well, I think that's kind of what he would put out there with this demonstration, is it was more of a calling card to say, people that want to get onto something that's brand new and cutting edge, we're looking for minds to do it.
Right.
And to the point of, you were talking about what happens if we add, let's say, 50 years
50
onto your
years.
life. Well, we've done it already in society.
Right.
And the actuaries and all will adjust as that comes along. Because it'll be like, okay, one of the questions will be, well, do you have an implant in your head?
Right.
So we know, okay, that's good, and so I think.
Which link do you have? The Neuralink? Do you have blah,
Which
blah, blah,
links
blah,
you
blah?
have,
Right.
and then so you're going to be on this link, so this link has this price, and this
Right.
one has this price, and who knows? But I think we've had to adjust so quickly. I was thinking about this the other day, we, in 1907, was that when the Wright brothers flew the first plane?
Yeah, I think that's
Right around
that's
that
right,
area. And to think,
What's that?
by
Kitty Hawk?
Yeah, and by World War II, they were introducing jets. I mean, you think how fast, and then
It's fast.
just how quickly in the last few years that as information is getting more and more out there, how much faster things are moving forward. Because stuff like you and I are having to adjust to a world that we did not grow up in.
No.
And it's not changed once or twice. It's changed multiple times. Whereas our grandparents were pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, just kind of.
You had a few
along.
things. The
Yeah.
car came along, and that was a
Polio
huge deal.
vaccine was awesome.
But we're looking at stuff that happens almost monthly.
Right.
That there's some new technology, some new advancement, some new and trying to and there's like podcasts.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, what a medium that didn't even exist.
I'm still getting used to the fact that I can pull up to a gas pump and pay by my telephone.
Yeah.
Like, that doesn't even seem right or natural. Like, it feels like I should be doing more. Or that I can hit a button and have all groceries for a week delivered, and it took no effort other than me pushing
Well,
the
they got the
button.
refrigerators now that calculate they make up your own list on their refrigerator. It
Right.
tells figures out what's inside of it.
Yeah, it
And what
inventories.
it inventories you, and you just push this and order it.
You have 1/2 gallon milk left, anticipated of it being gone.
It's like the
3.2
Jetsons
days.
when we watched the Jetsons on TV, when we
But
were little kids.
But you know what's funny? This is crazy. You even bring that up. So I read a little thing about the Jetsons because I do remember watching it, reruns as a kid and
Right.
and all through. If you were to take an episode of the Jetsons, other than living in outer space, which we do have a space station,
Mm-hmm.
we're actually more advanced than
Some
the
of things,
Jetsons.
yeah. It's like Star Trek,
Yeah.
They had these big recorders they talked on, but our little things do 10 times as much as theirs do.
Yeah. And it seems like, I appreciate technology. I like it. Like I was looking at a little gadget because I love gadgets, especially the cheaper they get. It's awesome. Because I remember when the VCR was $1,000. Do you remember
That's
this?
right. Yeah.
And then I remember, I think they made their last VCR 6-7 months ago on production line.
It's come and gone. The
It's come and
technology
gone.
comes just like
just
that.
gone. And you could buy it for $39. So $1,000 to $39 in 15 years. So that's crazy. But international travel, okay, and this is still going around Neuralink because this also is an article that Neuralink puts out. But so for less than $40 or an app that I can put on my telephone for free, and I do want to stop right here. Select Care Pharmacy actually have an app now.
Oh.
So if you want to go to your app store and download Select Care Pharmacy, you can keep up with all the new information that I put out there.
That was smooth.
That's smooth. No, it was just exciting to have that.
yeah.
I mean, I have an app. I
Yeah.
mean, that's pretty cool. But so for less than $40, I literally can hold a device or my phone in anywhere in the world and speak into it, but look at you in the eyes because you don't speak my language, and we can communicate real time. That's crazy because you remember the movies we used to watch? The guy digging through the book and totally messing it up.
Oh, yeah.
And it was comedy.
Yeah.
Now, communication is not even really that hard, that big of a deal. Unless you want to take the time to learn the language, which is always better because you're going to get the nuances and the little things. But to conduct a business transaction, you can hear me, I can understand you, and we can get our point across for less than $40. That's insane to me.
Now, can Neuralink some point be able to?
Neuralink has the ability, so they say, to where it can tap into that portion, which a lot of people, and I've happened to know about this maybe a little more through my career because I dealt with dementia a lot.
Right.
and it's not funny, but it is funny because one thing that we've noticed with dementia, the umbrella for Alzheimer's and everything
Right,
else,
right.
and people that have had family members with it, they'll understand this is how bizarre this can be. But you can have someone that gets this diagnosis and they start progressing, and some have early onset, and,
Right.
some progress really fast, and some progress slower. But everybody gets to a point, and you may have this gentle lady that has never said a curse word in their life, and shirt off their back, the neighborhood mother, and everything, and you go to visit them, and they're now in a memory care unit somewhere, and you come in and they cuss you out. And we have discovered that there's this quarter-sized portion of the brain that for some reason the plaque entangles, and I'm not getting scientific, and this is my common elementary explanation of it. So doctors out there, don't send me a million emails going,
Right.
you're wrong.
Right.
Okay, because this is what my truth is. This is the last thing to touch. So for some reason, you may not ever have cursed in your life, or it may not be a part of your daily vernacular. Right. But you know every curse word that's there.
That's right.
All right, and you have a pretty good base of what all of it means. Imagine words being jumbled, but that still being perfectly clear. So when you speak, that's just your natural, the synapses fire, and that's what comes flying out of your mouth. The person that hadn't seen you in years is going to be like, oh, my God. You just cussed me out, and I've never heard you cuss before. They didn't necessarily realize that's what they were doing, but those words are solidified words in their head. But imagine this device that A, keeps that from happening, A, keeps dementia from happening, but even better yet, before all that, you're speaking a whole different language to me, and it's processing as quicker than you can talk into my language, and me be able to speak back, and your Neuralink is processing what I'm saying to you, and even the what's the words that we use to split a real word? What do we call them in the South, especially?
Slang?
Slang.
Yeah.
You can even recognize slang or sarcasm.
Well, think about, because when we have language, people that are embedded in the language, they think in that language.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
but
right.
when you're talking to someone that's a different language, you're translating it.
Right.
So would a Neuralink be able to not necessarily translate, but make you think in those words? And because there's another process you go through if you're trying to speak a language that you're not familiar with.
Right.
You're saying, well, this word means this word and this word means that word. You don't think in terms of that. You think in terms of English.
Right. You do.
And
I dream in English and process.
So if you could put that in there and you could push a button or something to say, okay, I'm in a room with a bunch of Spanish people. I'm having a conversation. You can now think in Spanish. And
That would be awesome.
that would be, because language is just something, it's just learned. But at young ages, our brain is so receptive to language.
Right.
As we get older, it becomes more difficult. That's why in some places, kids that are 4 and 5 know 5 or 6 different languages.
Absolutely.
And they think anything of it.
Yeah, because it's just a normal part of their world. But imagine something even cooler. And I'd love to do this. Like, this is where I jump into the experiment right away, because I'd love to be doing this. Let's say you and I are just sitting eating dinner, right, and just having a conversation, because we have a lot of conversations about just nothing.
That's right.
About cool stuff, or about, let me tell you what happened yesterday that I find interesting. But let's say I'm telling you about a memory that I had. Like, 15 years ago, me and the family were at the mountain, and we're in the mountains. And this happened, and this bear came up on the woods, or came up on the deck, and he was the nicest bear. And I know I can't explain it, and it's not good to do, but hold on a minute. Let me share that memory with you. Now you can see it from my eyes. So not only am I telling you the story, I was able to send you the exact memory, picture and all, that I have. So now you can see like a storybook. So you can actually hear me and see the memory. What does that do to you? That actually puts you there so much more of a clear picture, because me telling a story, me communicating with you, ultimately I'm trying to paint you a picture. Mm-hmm. But now I sent you the video.
And see, that's where you get into that question about, is memory local or non-local?
Right. Is it crystallized or not?
Is consciousness local or non-local?
Right.
And so those barriers you start to figure out, because you'll have people that sit on both sides of that fence, and both of them are completely convinced that they're right. And I've heard the people that everything is in the body, and I've heard people say there's a much more spiritual side that we don't recognize.
Yeah.
And both of them will be completely convinced. But what's interesting is, and we've talked about this before, people have their paradigms. Mm-hmm. Science is just as much a religion as a religion is. Because what they're going to do is anything that doesn't reinforce their paradigm, they ignore.
Yes.
And we do that as people.
Right.
It's difficult not to do that.
Right.
But when you're, like, I've heard, discussions of the people that everything's here and everything's in your brain. You just talk to them about the split light thing, and they say, "Oh, I never heard of that."
Right.
We're talking about near-death experiences,
right.
or some of the stuff that's gone like that.
There's going to be a whole other show.
Which is a whole, and then you get into that. You get into the people with multiple personalities doing physiological changes to their body as they change personalities. Mm-hmm. Okay.
And it's recorded.
It's recorded, and right there, and this group goes, well, we just. Yeah. And then this group, when this guy says this, they go, well, we just don't. And so there's something in the middle where people have to open up and say, let's look at. See, my problem with science right now is it's all they come up with a hypothesis, mm-hmm. and then they try to prove that. Mm-hmm. Okay, so nothing is. Let's just see what's out there. Mm-hmm. Let's just take all the information. Mm-hmm. What they do is they have what they want to believe. Mm-hmm. And they only accept information that reinforces that.
Their agenda of what they believe.
And if it doesn't, we just reject it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, to me, is not real science.
Right.
Science is, okay, we're trying to figure out what's going here, so I want all the information I have and try to figure out how that fits in.
Right.
As opposed to, here's what my outcome's going to be.
And see, I think that's what made me so proud when I had a few people come up and say, hey, I appreciate what you do, because one thing that I've tried to do, and you're the same way every time, and really everybody, I don't split the fence. Being curious, I'm sitting here because I don't care if it's an opposing view of what I mm-hmm. maybe believe, or it's right in line with it. But I want to hear it, because I believe that there's truth somewhere. I don't know it though. That's the reality, because it's so unknown. And kind of going back to me shooting you the vision
right.
of the story, that could either be great or disappointing, because I thought about that a little bit too. You and I both read. Mm-hmm. We like to read information. You ever read a really good book, that wasn't anything that was going to make your IQ better, but it was just a fun read?
Right.
So halfway through the book, all the characters you have pictured. You have... in
your head, you
everything.
Have a vision of it.
Then all of a sudden they produce a movie, right? And you're so disappointed. And I'm gonna give you an example. Not that I have anything against Tom Hanks.
Okay.
All right. But Da Vinci Code was a cool book. Okay. A lot of people are like, once again, I don't like that book because it's messing with possible things that you should. I didn't read it that way. I just read it as an entertainment
right.
book. I didn't take any real. I didn't read that for knowledge or for me to go out and say, oh, this is
right,
true.
Right.
I just read it as a mystery thriller. Okay. But here was the problem. So Dan Brown does a good job with research, like historical fact of places right. and what it looks like. And also, he's so descriptive, it's amazing. So I had no problem when reading the book when he's talking about these different historical sites, whether it be churches or town halls and things of that nature. And almost after I saw the picture of them, really, I was like, he did a good job painting the picture, because it's almost identical to what I had in my head. But these characters, Robert Langdon, all this.
Right.
Then I see Tom Hanks' face, and I'm like, that's not what I had pictured. That was just disappointment, like in every possible way. But now, as time has went on, in many different movies of the books, Digital Fortress, all these other things, now I kind of associate Robert Langdon with him. So I've changed my views. So I wonder in normal everyday storytelling, when you tell me a story, because you'll tell me stories about, your son when he was in Clemson and
Right.
then moving to Florida
Right.
all this stuff. Well, as you're telling this, of course, I'm creating a picture.
Because we think in pictures.
We think in pictures.
We think in pictures.
So I have my own, in all transparency to people that don't know, I haven't sat down at a table and had a conversation with your son. So my picture is very different than your reality of your son. But it's my picture of him. But if you sent me the memory, it would throw all that off.
Yeah.
Like, that's not what I was picturing.
Or you meet someone and say, that's not what I pictured they'd look like.
Yeah, or I have a feeling today's episode, when it comes out in camera, people are like, that's not what I thought he sounded. That's not him. But I think as time goes, it'll all come together. They'll see. But it throws me with the Neuralink of how easily we can go to many different little topics about what it can change. But here's my take back on it. This is kind of where I'm at, and this is why I was excited to talk to you about it. A, because you're open with anything like this. I'm willing, not that I'll ever be asked probably, but I kind of think it's the coolest thing because I would love to see the potential of us as humans. Like, I realize that everything has a beginning and an end. I realize that E equals MC squared. What goes up must come down. I realize that there's certain principles in life we can't change. But did we make the principle what we consider a principle? Did we do that premature?
Well, E equals MC squared turned out to be premature.
That's what I'm saying.
We based our entire world around that.
Right.
And that works in one frame, but in a different frame, that doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
And that's where science gets all convoluted. See, I think with the Neuralink, you're going to have the controversy is going to come up when people go, somebody's going to put a company, a manufacturer, is going to put something in my brain.
Yeah.
And then they're going to go, people are going to go off on that. Well, are they going to start controlling my mind? Are they going to start controlling my thoughts? I think you're going to have a whole moral side of this. And because people will take something and expand out on it, extrapolate to say, okay, well, if you put that in my brain, suddenly I'm going to become your robot.
Right.
And I don't think that's what they're saying, but I think you're going to have people that are going to go down that road, and what I find very struggling in our society is that we are so polarized right now.
Mm-hmm.
When we grew up, we could have conversations with people that didn't have the same beliefs that you have. And today, man, it's just like it's very difficult.
People want to fight.
People want to fight, and people want to defend theirs.
And they want to destroy you and your character just because you're even bringing up maybe something
that you disagree with them on, or just have a different point of view on. And I think this may be also one of those things where you'll have one side's going to fall here and one side's going to fall here.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people forget to, let's look at what we can find a common ground and tell you, what if we could help people walk again?
Right.
But it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. Now he didn't get FDA approval.
No.
But I think he will.
I think I
he'll
think
go
with
back,
enough money,
correct the things that need
absolutely.
to get corrected. But I think what you're going to have is you're going to have a side of society that's going to drop down on the moral side of it.
right?
And the other side said we have to advance. And will they find a common ground? I don't know.
And
I lost a little hope in some of that stuff, I guess, which is not good.
Well, and to kind of wrap it up, this is kind of where I probably will leave this conversation, and we'll pick it up more. I believe with any change, technology, advancement of knowledge, we discover things. I believe you have to, truthfully, you're always going to be you. You're always going to be able to guide yourself on your beliefs, but you still have to be open for change. Because anytime you accept a change, like I used that gas station pulling up, getting gas. The moment that I actually did that, I accepted it. So therefore, I had to make changes within my own beliefs of security and safety and what that looks like. But the point that it led me to do it. if you were at a doctor's office and a new diagnosis, the doctor came in and said, Mr. Whitehurst, I have some bad news. And we all dread that.
Right.
That's a real conversation that each one of us will face somewhere in our life. But here's this medication. Here's a procedure.
Mm-hmm.
And that procedure or medication, somewhere in your life, there's something about it that maybe crosses the line of what you believed was right. But now all of a sudden you're in a new frame of mind because you're not dealing with others. You're not making a decision for others. Now all of a sudden it's directly affecting you.
That's right.
Are you going to change how you think when all of a sudden now it's in your face? And I believe my answer to that is yes. I'm constantly evolving, and I admit that. I know where I stand on a lot of things that I don't think are breakable, but I say I don't think, because there's certain things that I have strongly believed in until faced with directly.
Well, it's like.
And then I get scared.
Well, you think I could never do this. I could
Right.
never, shoot somebody.
Right.
Okay. Well, then what happens if your son or daughter is right here,
Right.
and that person is going to shoot them?
Right.
So the situations of morality.
Right.
Because we can all say, hey, here's what I believe, but okay, when, like you said, the doctor says you're going to die in 3 months.
Right.
I had a friend of ours who had stage 4 terminal breast cancer. Terrible situation.
Yeah.
They said, well, we got this experimental drug you can do. Totally experimental, totally, and of course she said, sure. They showed up to her house in a hazmat suit. She answers the door. The guy's in a hazmat suit, says, here's your medication.
Yes.
But you know what?
Radioactive.
But she's alive.
Yeah.
And it killed it. Now she says I got little foggy memories in there.
Sure.
But she says it worked. But in that situation, people say I would never take that.
Well, before that day, she wouldn't have walked and drank the water at Chernobyl.
That's right.
But that changed everything.
The situations of where and it's easy to tell this is my hard line, But when you put yourself in a situation, how reliable is that, And for some people, it's like, okay, that's fine, Other people, it's like, well, I don't really care, whatever.
Well, the conversation I'm glad we had today, because time flies by. We go through this quick. but what I wanted to do is I wanted at least people to take this and now start a conversation with it. Because if not anything, not Neuralink, whatever, which we're going to continue to follow this.
Right.
Because there'll be new articles come out, and every so often we're going to jump on this, and we definitely got to go back to UV lighting and what you've done. And that amazes me, what you do for your work.
Right.
About killing airborne everything. It's amazing in how simple the concept, but how people let it go. Technology.
Right.
So that's a whole nother conversation I do want to get into that people need to know. But the at least I want people to take this episode and have a conversation. Hey, look up Neuralink and kind of take your own opinion and form your own thoughts about it, because it's something you'll continue to hear about.
That's right.
So at least I want you aware of that. But I also want you to take what Trey said and discover, do you have a hard line? And faced with information new to you that could be life-altering or changing, are you dead set on what your belief is right now? Or does that change with your situation? And then that goes back to the other questions that we had about what's what. We don't know.
What's reality?
What is reality? Is reality what you're facing with right now, or is reality what you've been taught? Or is it what only you can see and what you don't know? So should that cause me and you to research and learn more? Like, should we just stay in our box and be happy and secure? Or should we venture out and maybe burn the fingertips on the stove every now and then, but yet at the same time learn a lot from it?
Well, when you go out and start looking at quantum physics and consciousness and some of these other things that are out there, it really challenges a lot of stuff that makes you, think through and say, okay, and it's interesting that how it gets enforced or not enforced on certain parts of our lives. But it does challenge you to start thinking, okay, let me think honestly about this.
Right.
Can I accepting we have paradigms
Right.
is the first step.
Right.
And then how to look beyond that is the hard part.
Right. Right. And I think once you learn, I don't know if it's the word learn is right, accept maybe, once you can get past the nursery wall as your reality, I think it becomes easier to see. Because now you're expecting something to be on the other side of the wall, where honestly you never thought anything beyond the wall.
Right.
So it's easier to accept new information, and we're not saying to believe it or not believe it. And I do wish that everybody would be like, I agree with that, I don't agree with that, and openly talk about that.
That's right.
That's awesome because it creates new things. I mean, there's no right or wrong there. But, you know, the conversation has to be started somewhere. And
That's right.
We think we talk. It's a place
That's
to
a
at
good place
least
to-
start the
that's
conversation.
right, that's right.
So, Trey, I appreciated another great episode.
This was
thought-provoking.
fun. Yeah.
Because I knew that the one subject we've created about 700 small holes we've dug.
Well, that's the thing. We start talking even off.
Yes.
We start talking about this and that and the other, and we start getting into some very deep conversations very quickly.
Well, this isn't a show that's going to give you a conclusion to an answer.
That's right.
This is simply just going to start a thought process.
That's right.
And then hopefully we can continue on with we'll say, you know what, that was a great little conversation. We haven't not really talked about that. Let's dig into that more. And
Right.
and you're going to find shows that we're going to give answers to and things like that. But it's just a thought-provoking what's going on and kind of really create where you stand and to see how tall you really are standing, or are you willing to bend over a little bit and dig for some more information. I mean, that's pretty cool.
It's happening. It's happening. And so it's a question of, are you just to ignore it or just...
Yeah. Are you going to ignore it and stay in your own world, or are you going to accept it and embrace it and then maybe enjoy some of the fruits that it produces?
That's
I
right.
mean, because it's definitely changing whether you want it to or not.
That's exactly right.
Once again, thank you.
Hey, it's been fun.
I
Thanks
know,
again for having
I know
me.
you'll be back on because there's going to be another subject I'm going to say, Trey, I need you to get your quantum physics self over here and let's talk about this. But I do want to thank everybody that tunes in every week. It is certainly a pleasure to bring you the information and the guests such as Trey and all the other experts and people to start a conversation. And please stay tuned next week. We'll have another great show for you. And until then, God bless.